I think if people saw this dude, that they could be like, okay, I may not get all of it, but he really cares. Yes. Well, first of all, before I talk about first of all, you're my homie.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
And I thank you for inviting me. And I just want to say, because I think people don't really realize what you have done. And I talk about all the time, you being an elected lieutenant governor. I think people don't understand the historical ramifications and the beauty of that. I've never seen it. Yeah. I've been in the State House since I was 22. Wow. So I just want to give you honor.
What are you, 25, 26 now? Wow.
It's the melanin.
It's the melanin. Seriously, you guys are like, it's not
great.
even fair. It's not fair.
It's not.
Oh, man.
Not. We look great. My grandma was 99. She looked like she was 67.
Oh, my goodness.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But I just want to give you your flowers and honor you because I don't think the people always know what you actually accomplished.
I appreciate it.
You weren't just put on a ticket. Yeah. You fought for a position that's elected. And so I just want to thank you for educating me that could even happen. And thank you for being dope.
Yeah, thanks. Hey, I love it. I will take that, Terry. Thank you. I think that's the nicest thing anyone said to me today.
Thank you.
My staff, are you listening to that? I'm good.
All week he's going to be like,
I know, right? Yeah. Hey, I'm going to get a button that says, Terry says I'm dope. So, No, I really appreciate that. And it was a God thing because I didn't even realize really the process could work that way. It was like God planted the seeds, and by using people in my life that I respected, and they said, hey, what about this? And through it was really a season of just little promptings from the Holy Spirit, and God directs the steps. Bible says we can plan out our paths, but the Lord is the one who directs our steps.
Absolutely.
And I feel like I'm here only because God is directing my steps, and it's fun. We got a great team. My staff's awesome. I mean, you got to meet some of them here today, and so it's just an amazing culture that we have in this office, and around the state. We live in an amazing state. So,
we do.
Yeah,
we do.
Yep.
We got some work to do.
We do, absolutely.
But we do live in an amazing.
It would be boring if we didn't have work to do.
That's
right?
true.
What did God tell Adam? He said, "Hey, the garden is here," and he said, and outside the garden, the world is unsubdued, right?
Yes.
So go out and subdue it. So you got work to do. Even in a perfect world, Adam had a job to do, right? He had work to do. So work's a good thing, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
I love it.
Yeah.
So I will tell you a little bit about me.
Yeah, please.
I am an Army brat. So I was actually born on a base in Landstuhl to a single mother. So she had to give, a lot of people don't know, when you're a single parent in the Army, you have to give guardianship to someone else if you're not married.
Wow.
So she gave guardianship to my grandparents. So they kind of raised me. That's why I kind of have an old soul. I'm kind of old school.
Yeah.
But I'm IPS student. My grandmother was the 14th black nurse in Indiana.
Wow.
She played no games.
Wow.
So we always were taught you work for what you get. You be a productive citizen. You take care of your family. Values. That's what she taught us. And so I went on to college. I didn't finish, but God led me to the State House. Okay. I was here for 10 years under then Secretary of State Todd Rokita. I was telling Kat, I was 2 days under Sue Ann Gilroy. We'll get to that in a minute. Right? And then the Lord led me, like you said, one day the Lord was like, I want you to start wearing suits to work. And I was like, in the State House? In the basement? In the business services? I started wearing a suit. But he was preparing me to become a CEO. And I then left. I retired from the state at 30.
Wow.
And now I'm a serial entrepreneur and own all kind of stuff.
I love it. That's amazing. Okay, so you work with Todd in the he was the youngest Secretary of State.
He was.
In the history of the state, right?
Ever.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
I knew him before he was married.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Wow.
Shout out to Kathy Rokita.
Yeah, I know.
That's
she's great. So was that, you would have probably been about the same age, or were you?
He was, I think Todd was 24.
Okay.
He might have been 26. You know what? Don't give me the line.
Okay.
I don't know totally. He was in his 20s.
What was it like working with an elected official who was basically your age, though?
Yeah, I mean, you know what's so crazy is, first of all, Todd was so...
Like, I shouldn't say that because a lot of people work with elected officials who are their age, but that young, I guess, is maybe, let me rephrase that.
It was very different because if you know Todd, he always had a vision of what he wanted it to be and built folks around him. It was very interesting because, I mean, he was the youngest person in this building.
No kidding. Like, even the interns or LAs would be older than he
like they're around the same age as him, but any other elected official, he was the youngest. So to see that and see the changes and understand his position as Secretary of State, like I think people don't get, our state is governed by a constitution, and what he does as Secretary of State, he can never be, you know, his position can never go away. But you can change it, it can be moved, but so we had to understand procedures, because I was here when Governor O'Bannon passed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And then Governor Kernan stepped in.
Yeah,
wow.
but as Secretary of State, our office had to be ready because we had to know what happened after that.
Yeah.
And so Todd prepared us for that. So just to...
Did you know Governor Bannon was going to die?
No, we didn't. Well, I mean, he wasn't young.
Yeah, okay, but he was preparing you even beforehand, just to say, hey, in the case of an emergency, right, this is
X,
Y,
what
and
happens
Z.
with our office, it's what happens with the treasurer's office.
Yeah.
It's crazy. People it's a whole legal constitutional process.
We were at a Lincoln Day not too long ago, and it was the governor and myself. You had the treasurer, I think the comptroller, Secretary of State.
That's my girl, Elise.
Elise. Yeah, we were all in like the same Lincoln Day, and someone gets up on stage and looks at all of us, you know, sitting down front, and they're like, "We've got the governor, lieutenant governor." You know, they list all, you know, Secretary of State. You know. And then he stops and he's like, "Haven't you all watched Designated Survivor? Like, what are you doing? You know, like you're in the same place.
What are you
One
doing?
well-placed missile could destroy our entire state right now."
We're dead. Now we got to start over.
Yeah. It's pretty funny.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
I love it.
So then you retired, became a serial entrepreneur. You got family, right?
Yes.
So
I have recently just had a little baby.
Congratulations.
Well, she's going to be 11 months old.
That's awesome.
Kyrie. She needs her own channel. But the Lord blessed me. I was Hannah, really, in the Bible. I wanted a child, and God told us we were going to have a child 3 years into our marriage, but then she didn't come till 8 years later. But we knew she was coming prophetically. Yeah. We knew her name, so when we found out, it's funny, we had really stopped thinking about a baby.
Wow.
And here she comes. At 43, I have a baby.
You guys are Abraham and Sarah.
I am.
That's
and
awesome.
Sarah was so fine at 90.
No kidding. The king of Egypt was trying to
at 90?
Take her for his own,
What do you look like at 90 where the king is got to have
I know, right? Yeah. They did live to be a lot longer back then, but
but come on. Yes.
Well, that is really cool. And I love that you, in both stories, you're like, the Lord told me to wear a suit. The Lord told me we were going to have a baby, right? It's so uncommon to hear people just talk about it like it's just a normal relationship between you and the Lord, right? Like, he talks to me, and I'll say that to people and be like, "Hey, God told me this. God said," and they'll be like, "God told you? Like, what are you, crazy?" And it's so sad because it's like, man, God wants to speak to all of us.
Yes.
And we just, most people just aren't listening, right?
I think people don't understand. I think people, they look at church and think that defines God. And sometimes that can get a little in the mix when you have people.
Yeah, that's right.
But I think people don't understand that as much as we want to be in God's presence, sometimes selfishly and sometimes we're thankful, he wants to be in our presence as well.
Yeah.
I asked God one day, why did you make us? Because I don't know, those are the kind of things I ask. And he was like, because I wanted children. And that just hit me that's something we would say.
Yeah.
And just understanding his heart. And I think if you spend time with God, you'll learn his personality. I think sometimes God is just people's savior and not their father.
That's so good.
So you have to spend time. You have to be obedient. to get to the father part. But the Lord, I love the Lord more than my husband, more than my children, more than my family, because he saved me. He fixed this mess, and he's still fixing.
Amen.
He's my biggest investor. He's my biggest cheerleader. How can I not talk about it? He put me in the State House. I didn't want to be in the State House. I was like, I'm not supposed to be here.
Yeah.
I'm from 33rd and Clifton. What,
Hey,
what am I doing in the state?
You and me both, sister.
You know what I mean?
You and me both, right? Yeah.
It's what he'll do.
And as the ironic thing is that as you love God more, you love your husband more and better. You could never love your husband as well as you can love him without loving God first.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I think that's an amazing thing that I've learned in my life. The more you put God first, the more that everything else kind of falls into place. And but oftentimes that's the one relationship we neglect, or we say, I don't have time for it, but it's everything.
You just said it. I have changed my language about putting God first. I used to say, because that's what they teach you in church, put God first. The problem with that is subsequently it means something is second, which means it's close. There's nothing close to him. So I don't put him first. He's everything.
He's everything.
And he's in everything.
Yeah.
So I don't put him first.
Yeah.
He's in everything. I think he is what my life orbits around.
Yeah.
But because I used to put God first. I pray in the morning, I do that. But then that means something is second to him.
So that's a great transition point to you're in politics.
Is that a great
it is. Well, how do you do that in politics, right? Because nobody thinks make God the center of politics, right? They might say, well, I put God first in politics.
Yeah.
But if he's everything, then that means he's everything in that world too, right?
Yep.
And so how do you do that? How do you walk that line? And what does that look like for you?
Well, I first know I don't know anything.
Okay. There you go. Okay.
And once I know that, I have to ask God everything to do. So like when I got into this world, like the civics that I was taught in IPS, no disrespect, didn't teach me the real understanding of what happens in the State House and the process. So when I got here, it was a world filled with everything. Like people don't understand, whatever you want to do in this world of politics, you can do, whether good or bad. And so I had to be guided, God, how do I do this? And how do I talk about this? And what happens when this happens? Because I just had no clue. And it was a culture shock. Let's get into it. I'm a little girl from 33rd and Clifton. I grew up around all, pretty successful black people. But most white people I knew were really above me. They were figures of authority. So when I got to the State House, back then, I'm not going to say the date because people don't need to know my age. Most of the people in here were older white men, and I didn't know how to communicate with them. Yeah. I was like, hey, sir. They're like, no, Terry, let's go to lunch. Okay, sir. I didn't know what to do. I didn't understand the power of my perspective because nobody had ever shown me a older white man being a colleague. I had to work through that, and God had to teach me like my power of my perspective matters. He has a perspective that works for him, and I have a perspective, and they both matter. No perspective is bigger than the other, but I had to learn that, and I had to lean on God so many days because it was terrifying at first.
It's all about authority, right? And I think sometimes we warp authority and abuse authority and don't walk in authority well. Or sometimes we think we don't need to be in authority. Oh, hey, I'm not gonna. This guy's not not king of the world. I'm not gonna, submit to his authority, right? That could have been very easy for you to do. But even Jesus submitted to authority, right? Yes. He submitted to the authority of the Father. Not my will, Lord, Father, but yours be done. And so authority, we all have to recognize we are all people under authority, right?
Absolutely.
And I think when you get that, it's not a bad thing to be under authority. It's a good thing to be under authority. Yeah. And then you can deal with authority well. It's not somebody that is ruling over you. It's somebody that maybe God has placed in a position of authority so that it will help you become who he wants to make you to become. But so often in our culture right now, we knee-jerk back against authority. We say, we don't, I don't play by anybody's rules but my own. I've actually said that before. So I was like, wait a minute. I need to probably not say that anymore.
But then you also have people that abuse authority.
Sure. So then accountability, how do you hold people accountable when they do abuse authority? Right?
Yeah, I think, Kat and I were talking earlier about the difference of perspective and authority. I have a friend from Mooresville. She knows who it is. So, hey, girl. Her dad was a Mooresville police officer. So in her experience, the police and their authority was always there to protect her. That was not my experience. The police in my neighborhood were no different than the other gangs. They were into prostitution. They sold drugs.
Wow.
They did violent things. So to me, you had vice lords, gangster disciples, and the police department. They were all the same to me.
Wow.
They were never protective for me. I felt like I had to be protected from them until I actually got into community and I met some officers that were good. And I was like, oh, it's good police. Yeah. And so neither one of those perspectives is wrong because that's our lived experience.
It's your perspective. Yeah.
And so sometimes when we're talking about authority, sometimes that authority is different depending on the demographic and the social economic status people are in, and they don't experience it that way. I think in our generation, our area, I think people are just like, that's not true. It's like, how do you know?
Yeah.
You haven't lived my experience. I could say, girl, the police don't protect you. And she'd be like, girl, what are you talking about? So I think, we talked about this. Two things can be, that could be in the same space at the same time and not be wrong. It's just a different perspective, a different experience.
And maybe the question is, what should the authority be like? So the truth would maybe say authority should be this way, right? Should the police have been gangsters in your community? No. The truth would have said, no, they are there to serve and protect. And so there was an abuse of authority, right? And so I think sometimes we have to say, okay, hey, lived experience is absolutely respected, right? You live an experience, you can't negate somebody's experience. That's their experience, right? But what is the truth? What should have happened? Like, when were they abused, mistreated, victimized? Like that shouldn't have been the case. It was, but let's walk people back to healing. And I dealt with this in youth ministry. You'd have, hey, God is a good father. Well, some kids, they don't have good fathers.
Right.
They wouldn't know what to do with that. I don't want God to be a father because my father's treated me like crap. Some people would, some kids would come up to me. It's hard for me to reconcile God as a father.
Right.
So you have to kind of walk them back and say, hey, here's a picture of a good father. Your father, dropped the ball. Your father did really bad things. Your father was not the authority figure he should have been. But here's the truth, and the truth is this is what good looks like. And I think that's probably that's a hard journey to walk.
I think it's hard, but then, you can't, with that abuse of authority and who the police showed themselves to be to me, there has to be a corrective action within the culture of the police.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's going to be justice, right?
Yeah, I mean, they should be good, and that should all work, but that's
when you need somebody to come in and kind of, lay the hammer down on the people that were abusing authority because it leaves so many ripple effects.
Absolutely.
So when there's no justice, then it all gets out of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if there hasn't been justice for decades and this has gone on and not been addressed, how do you fix that? Yeah. Because now this is the norm in the culture. So,
So let's jump into the three-fifths compromise.
Oh, well, let's go right there. Yes. Yes.
Well, because we wanted to talk about that, right? Because we've talked about that multiple times. So
I have a problem in so many ways about that.
Well, let's do it. I'm all good with that.
Okay.
So for people who don't know, just if they're watching, so I made a video talking about the three-fifths compromise and how it was a good thing for America. It got us to where we are today. It stopped the South from having more influence in Congress. It was the North's way to make sure that the South would actually stop dehumanizing the African American population, and so it was the first step in that. But then it kind of blew up, right? Like everyone was like, And listen, I stand by my comments. People are like, do you want to apologize? No, I said everything I said was exactly historically accurate. It's right, it's true, and it's a good thing because it got us to where we are today. Without it, we wouldn't even be the nation that we are today. So that's what I said. So now give me the rebuttal.
Okay. I have three.
Right. Okay, dang.
First of all, I've been prepared. First of all, I have an issue because I feel like I know the senator that made the statements. She and I are friends.
Okay, yes.
So,
and I like her. She's not a bad person.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
But my thing is, I don't feel like her argument had anything to do with the bill. Like, I feel like the Senate Bill 289, her argument.
And for those who don't know, I was responding to what the senator had said on the floor.
Right.
Because she brought up the three-fifths compromise, and she was saying, and she's an African-American woman. She was like, I wouldn't have been treated more than three-fifths of a person, the founding fathers, all like essentially alluding to the fact that, hey, like she wasn't even considered a person.
Right.
And just kind of vilifying the the greatness of what our nation was built upon, and that's where I took a little bit of issue with that. But yes, go.
Yeah. So I feel like her argument wasn't valid.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
So I was like, don't take the bait for the Democrats of a non-valid argument, and you took the bait.
Yeah, maybe I don't see it as taking the bait. I see it as countering the cultural narrative because how many people, it's amazing to me how, and I don't want to sound mean, but people are so ignorant on the history of America.
That's true.
And I was like, holy smokes, people. I mean, you got people that I'm like, I certainly would have thought you would have known better that this is what happened, but they're saying that's not what happened. That's
the thing, because we get to perspective, because you and I understand this. Facts doesn't necessarily equate to truth.
Wait.
You said those words before. What are you doing?
What are you talking about? I've never said those words.
Facts doesn't always equate to truth.
Okay. Explain that to me. Okay, are you saying that? Yeah, we'll explain it to me.
Okay, so I'm a Federalist Papers girl.
Yes.
So yes, legislatively, their intention was to stalwart the South in their intentions, right? But at the core, those are facts. It was a legislative strategy. I'm for that.
Sure, right. Yeah.
But the truth is, it's still wealthy white men designating what black bodies are.
Right.
That's a problem.
100%.
So, and the 3/5 compromise, in their intention was to stalwart, how do you say that word, stalwart? Stop the South from expanding, but it actually had the opposite effect. They became wealthier because of the 3/5 compromise. Because here,
the South did?
Yes, they did. And so let's put a pin in that.
Sure. Yep.
So that 3/5 made those black bodies citizens, right?
It was
non-voting citizens.
It was a 3/5 of the entire population. It wasn't 3/5 the person. The way the Constitution, it says 3/5 of all other persons will be counted.
Right, because it was about the population representation.
That's right.
But subsequently, that makes them a non-voting citizen.
That's right. But remember, the people arguing to count the black slaves as one whole person was the pro-slave South. Now, why would the pro-slave South want their slaves to be counted as one whole person when they were not going to give them personhood? This had nothing to do with person. They saw them as property. They were going to mistreat them and abuse them all day long because it was an economic engine.
It was going to give them a legislative advantage to have more representatives.
Right. The census would be higher for the South. Therefore, they could have more legislators in Congress codify slavery into the Constitution to the point where we would have never been able to deal with it and get rid of it over time. The North saw this.
Possibly.
Well, I actually think what would have happened is there would have been no agreement on the Constitution. And
South, we might not have a union.
We wouldn't have a nation. The South would have started their own nation. Or honestly, probably what would have happened, we'd have 13 different nations right now.
Right, or we'd be like little countries.
We would, yeah.
And I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
But it is also, it does in a sense make them a 3/5 of a non-voting citizen with no representatives. Nobody's representing their interests.
Correct.
So,
but up until that point, they were counted as zero.
That's true.
Right?
But
so now they got 3/5. Like we're moving in the right direction, are we not?
No.
You're not?
I'm still not a whole person.
I understand that. But, okay, Terry, you love the Lord. You know Scripture really well. Show me in Scripture where God just snapped his fingers and made the wrongs right overnight.
When he created the earth.
Oh, no, that wasn't a wrong. That was no. But my point is oftentimes when there's evils and wrongs in the world, the Lord gives us steps to take to get back onto the path of righteousness.
I can agree with that.
I think this was the step that we needed to take, which is a good thing to get us back on the path of righteousness. So somebody like you, 250 years later, can actually be seen as a legitimate, equal person in society.
I love that, but I don't know legislatively if that's actually the truth. I don't know if the 3/5 would have actually led to the Emancipation Proclamation. I don't know that it led, period. I think it stalled the South from being able to codify slavery. But at the end of the day, the Emancipation Proclamation was a war tactic. It wasn't a moral situation. Now, I know Abraham Lincoln morally did not like slavery.
And the Republican Party was started in Ripon, Wisconsin for the primary purpose of eradicating slavery. That's why they started the Republican Party. Oh my gosh, come on, Terry.
I'm just going on Abraham Lincoln. What he wrote to General Conkling was, if I don't have to free the slaves and I keep the Union, I'll do that. If I free the slaves and that will keep the Union, I will do that. He was acting as commander-in-chief. What I love about Abraham Lincoln, he was objective. This is not my personal feelings. I'm trying to save the Union. But if he could have not freed the slaves and kept the Union, he would have done that.
Yeah, but did he?
Well, no, he didn't, because what that
he was able to do both.
Well, he did it because it weakened the South. It weakened the South's resources. Because at the end of the day, Lincoln was trying to bring the railroads through the United States and the Industrial Revolution, and Southerners are agricultural. They were like, don't bring that over here.
Yeah.
And he was like, I don't care.
You know what's interesting about this path, though? So you start 1787, you have the Three-Fifths Compromise, we get the Constitution. Now, Frederick Douglass did say of the Constitution, in him, great abolitionist, he said it's a glorious liberty document. So he saw the Three-Fifths Compromise. Here's a freed black slave.
Because he was a slave.
He was. And he said, look at this.
That's probably great to a former slave.
This is a glorious liberty document. What?
Wait, to a former slave, that's pretty great. To me, not so great.
Whoa, but, okay, wait. He's like the greatest abolitionist of our culture in our nation. And he looks at the Constitution with the Three-Fifths in it, and he says, this is a liberty document for my people.
Because he would... Right, because legislatively he was in the time, and he saw the push forward.
Yes,
the intention of the push.
That's a good thing.
The intention.
Is that
but
good?
It took another 78 years.
Okay,
so 78 years they were beaten and raped and held shackles.
Yes.
That's not great.
That's right. And the Israelites were enslaved for over 400 years.
No, we're not going to do the Israelites.
No, what I'm saying though, like God, I wish sometimes God would snap his fingers and make the wrongs right overnight.
Yeah.
It pains me to see injustice, and I know it pains God's heart to see injustice.
Yes.
But for some reason he tarries, right?
That's
some
true.
reason he doesn't always do it right away.
That's true.
And I don't know why. I don't know his perfect time, but I will tell you this.
Okay.
In between the Civil War and the 1787 with the Constitution with Three-Fifths, in the 1830s with John Quincy Adams, he actually goes to the South and he brokers a deal with the South to end slavery in 7 years. He tells the South, he says, hey, we have to end slavery. I mean, even the Southerners at this point knew how abusive and wrong slavery was.
Well,
The only reason the majority of the Southerners, the reason they kept slaves is not because they wanted to abuse people. It was because it was their economic engine. It was literally no. Hold on a second.
Okay.
Let me get where I'm going with this.
Okay. Yes.
And so they actually, and here's one of the reasons I know this is because they actually agreed to do that. The Southern states said to John Quincy Adams, they said, we will do that. Give us 7 years to get our economic house in order, because we can't. Who's gonna farm our fields, right?
Because obviously we can't.
They can't, right?
Our family couldn't farm it.
They didn't know how to. And Booker T. Washington even wrote about that. He said after they were freed, he said, "Hey, you need to have compassion on these former slave owners because they don't know how to live without us."
I'm not going to have compassion.
No, I know, but that's what Booker T. Washington said.
God bless
him. And he's an amazing man. But so John Quincy Adams goes back to the North and says, guys, praise the Lord. We have a deal, 7 years, give them 7 years, and we can eradicate this evil from our land once and for all and be done with it. You know what the North said? The North said, no, we want it now because it's evil and wrong and we want it now. And John Quincy Adams goes back to the South and says, they want it now. Can we do that? The South said, no way. And the deal fell apart. This was in the 1830s.
Yeah.
And then another 40 years goes by.
Yep.
And the Civil War happens. 700,000 Americans, primarily white people.
Absolutely.
The blood was shed. Abraham Lincoln said, for every blood drawn by the whip, we are now paying the price with blood drawn by the bullet, right? Yeah. And it was God's justice. Thomas Jefferson, even back in 1787, said, I tremble for my nation when I remember that God is just and his justice cannot sleep forever. He was speaking of slavery.
Yes.
And he was saying, it's evil. And if we don't deal with this, God's justice isn't going to sleep forever, and we're going to get a butt kicking. And I look at the John Quincy Adams story. I'm like, man, God was giving us a lifeline, and yet you had this righteous indignation of the North saying, no, we want it now because we know how evil it is, and they couldn't see that maybe this is God's way to end it. It wasn't going to happen overnight, but 7 years. And how much better would it? Because to your point, there was even after the 30s, there's another 40 years of people being vilified, raped, beaten, abused. And the Lord is saying, guys, I gave you a path. And you kept rejecting that path.
Absolutely.
So that's just,
I think that's why the nation, we still have never really reconciled since slavery. I think things are better.
Wait, hold on a second. I got to push back on that. What do you mean we've never reconciled since slavery?
We are still racially divided. It never goes away. Like, I feel bad for the other people in America, because it seems like white people and black people, we are always in this fight. Everybody else is like, hey, I'm over here. We're always
Don't
in this.
forget me.
Hey, I'm over here.
The Asians are in the corner waving, hey, what about us?
Hey. Because, yes, I thank you for acknowledging slavery and the horrors of it, right? And the mental anguish of it. And yes, legislatively, they were freed. But the mental and physical and emotional damage to those people did not go away. My great-grandmother was a slave. My grandmother was a sharecropper / indentured servant. That's what I came up with. And I watched her one day. My grandma was a great cook, Southern. She's from North Carolina. She was a Geechee. You ever heard of Geechee people? Taught you something. You go look that up. You love history. Look up Geechee.
Is something
people.
weird going to pop up on my Google search if I search for Geechee?
It might. You might want to say Geechee people.
Yeah. Geechee. I don't know if that's going to help,
people,
Terry.
North and South.
It's like, oh my gosh, what in the world? Terry's going to be like, gotcha.
I got you. Geechee people in the Carolinas. Let's do that.
All right. Terry Dove-Pittman's grandmother. I'm just going to do that, all right? How about that?
Thank you.
Yeah.
And she pulled she pulled biscuits out with no oven mitts. And I'm thinking, because I'm such an educated black person, I'm like, oh Lord, grandma got the sugar. So she's got diabetes, she's got neuropathy, she can't feel. And I said, grandma, you need to go to the doctor about it. She was like, about what, child? I was like, you just pulled a whole hot thing out of the oven. She said, that's from picking cotton. I haven't been able to feel my fingers since I was 7. And, she later talked to me about the cotton gin. I was like, well, grandma was to help produce more cotton. She said, baby, initially they built that to wash the blood out of the cotton. And that is just sobering to me, that a woman I love so much, people still saw her less than a person. Even if legislatively they said, no. But that doesn't mean people's beliefs and ideas changed because documents were signed. So I think that's the issue that some people have.
I totally respect that and get that, right?
Yeah.
Parents, grandparents, great grandparents. Just because the law changed doesn't mean that instantly culture changed, right? What I'm saying is, I think culture has changed. I think now in America, it's taken the civil rights movement. I mean, it didn't just start with it didn't just Emancipation Proclamation and we're good, right?
Right.
It was years, another 100 years of fighting for people now to be seen as people, right? As equal people.
Yes. Because some people took that 3/5 of this is my belief system.
That's right. Yes. And but here's my concern is that, how the Lord commands us, don't go back and take on your sin. Don't take your sin back on your shoulders. I feel like what we're doing is we're taking our victimhood back on our shoulders. When we do that, when we say, well, my grandma or my grandpa, my family, there's abuse in my family from years past, right? Where suicide and my grandpa's side. But I don't take that on. I don't say, hey, because my great grandpa committed suicide, somehow that now means I live that. I don't.
Now you're centering. You're centering on yourself.
Okay.
Your grandpa and my grandma my great grandma being treated less than a dog is not the same thing of emotional dysfunction.
My great grandpa was treated poorly.
Was he Irish?
What do you have against the Irish?
No, I love the Irish. They used to call the Irish the Black Irish.
No, he was not. But
okay.
But again, his personal story was one of just abuse and he was. Led him to suicide, right? Mm-hmm. So again, I'm not saying culturally his because of his race or something like that, but he had a very tough life, right?
Yeah.
Which caused him to take. So my grandpa didn't even know his dad, right? He was he essentially raised himself, and then his mom died when he was a young boy. I think he was around 10 years old. So my grandpa basically was raised by his sister.
Gotcha.
And so, but I very rarely heard anything going back to say, because of my dad or my grandpa, then, and I feel like we have to be careful. God does not give us the freedom to be victims. Now, we might be victimized, but to be a victim, you're taking on the identity of that. And I think that's just my only concern. I'm not saying you're doing that. I'm just saying.
Gotcha. I think culturally, that's what people in a different demographic culture think that's what this is.
Yeah.
I think honoring my grandmother, the stock that I came from, you about to make me cry. I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry.
I got some tissues somewhere. I cry all the time. It's fine.
I know.
I'm on stage at the church, preaching, and I'm like, something powerful hits. And I'm like, oh, gosh.
The DNA that I came from were people that came from the ships that bared what happened before they were freed. And after they were freed, were still treated. This is the DNA I come from. Mm-hmm. So when I say this happened to my great-grandmother, and she still could smile, she still raised children. She still, like, if you look at my Facebook page, when I talk about my grandmother, she was 99. But she has 4 CEOs as grandchildren. She has 3 children, one that worked for Bausch and Lomb, 2 of them that were in the Army. When I say this is what happened to my great-grandparents and my ancestors, and yet, look what we birthed. Look what they birthed. Mm-hmm. That is not victimhood. It is pride. I think sometimes people from different cultures don't see that that's what we're saying.
Sure.
I'm saying that's pride. And because those were long 78 years.
You overcame, right? You were overcomers, right?
And overcoming.
Overcoming. And I think that is absolutely awesome. I love that. Like but
Black people are the most patriotic people in this country.
I don't disagree with that.
Because we're the only people that were not immigrated here.
Yeah. And I want to make sure that we don't find ourselves slipping back into a culture of victimhood, because there is a victim chic culture. I do think we see that, like, who can be the most victim of all victims. Like, it's like the victim Olympics, like, or oppression Olympics, right? Where it's like, oh no, I'm more oppressed than this person or this people group, or I'm more. And it gets to the point where I'm like, guys, if you knew your identity and who God says you are, like, you wouldn't be trying to be the most oppressed, because we got people that are people groups and they're making up ways to feel oppressed. Like, I was at Starbucks and they didn't give me the right order, and it's because I'm a, so-and-so type of person. And it happens, right? And
I'm really the first person to go off, because if you're the person standing in front of me and I don't get my order, we got a problem. But yeah, I do agree. And some of that is the liberal culture, which is why I am conservative.
Yeah.
Because I feel like some of that is, when do you finally take some personal responsibility for your life?
Yeah.
Yes, the DNA that runs through me are strong and they're amazing and almost majestic in my eyes.
Yeah.
So I have to be nothing but successful. My aunt was a principal in the 60s, and I used to ask her, why didn't you go out there and protest? She said, the way I protested, I became a principal of a school when they didn't expect a Black woman to be a principal. That's how I protested. And so I asked her, like, with this whole thing going on with Trump and all the stuff.
Yep.
She said, this civil rights movement is going to be very different than ours. And I said, why, Auntie? She said, because we could have never imagined you all would be where you are. And I was like, what do you mean? She was like, you all are millionaires and CEOs and running industries and looking globally. We were just trying to get jobs and food. You know what I mean? So we can't even minister to you. That's what I was telling you about first-generation wealth builder. They can't even minister to us because we're in places unimaginable to them.
Yeah.
So, yes, I'm not one with, woe is me, because I'm Black, I'm always be poor. That's just craziness. America, what I love about America is this is the one place in the world where if you start in one station, you don't have to stay there.
Yeah.
If you start out poor, you can become wealthy.
Yeah.
If you start out with a rough situation, you can become educated and get a great job. That is amazing. But we cannot act like systemic racism doesn't exist. It does. It's not as effective. And I think bigotry has become more subtle. It's not as overt. But we still have some work to do.
Do you think bigotry is more subtle because culture has said we don't accept this anymore? Which I would.
That's a good question.
Because I think that's probably what's happening. As a culture, we've said, hey, we don't accept bigotry. Like, And I think culturally, I think most people, I don't know of I mean, you can't find a business that's out there promoting bigotry or, stuff like that. So I think culturally
not overtly.
No, exactly. No one would ever do that, right? Because it's become taboo, right? We don't want to be bigots.
It's economic. I need their money.
Well, yeah, okay, maybe. Yeah. Yes, I agree with that. I think there are some businesses out there that will do whatever they need to do just to make money. But why would they do that? Because culturally, it won't sell if you're pushing bigotry, right? So I think that's a good thing to where, hey, we've kind of as a culture said that's not welcome here, right? And so if you really truly are a bigot or a racist, you have to kind of be subtle or hide it because culturally we've done the work and we've pushed it out, which I think we should celebrate that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes we mix bigotry with systemic racism.
Okay, now I'll say this. I don't think the system of government is systemically racist anymore.
How do you know?
Because everyone has equal justice. I mean, there's just not...
Systemic racism wasn't created for you.
No, but I'm saying, show me where the system is going to treat somebody differently because of their skin color right now. I don't see that in the court system. I don't see that in even in the business world.
You don't see it in the court system.
I don't, no.
And see, that's what I'm saying. It goes back to subtleties.
Well, can I say this? I think there's systemic racism in the breakdown of the family. I think that may be, if I'm going to agree with you on systemic racism, we have incentivized as a government the breakdown of the family, and it's actually hurt the minority communities far more than it's hurt the non-minority communities, right? So I'll give you an example. Inner city single mom, she gets rewarded for being unmarried because if she were married, she wouldn't get the assistance financially from the local government to help her because she would not be considered in that category anymore. So the system says, hey, we'll help you financially, but you got to stay unmarried. Well, we know, one of the quickest ways to poverty is to have a child out of wedlock. You're 4 times more likely to live in poverty if you have a child outside of wedlock.
Absolutely.
Right? So to me, that's where the system, I would agree. I think there is systemic racism.
Okay, wait a minute.
Hurts.
What did you just say?
I said I kind of agree.
What? How you gonna backpedal? Okay.
I had to catch myself. I had to catch myself. I
gotta agree. So So sometimes I don't like your usage of words. So. Wait.
That's all I do is talk. I got to talk for a living, right? So
it hit me once I said it. Okay, but so kind of when you say rewarded, you got to look at the New Deal and what the Democrat Party did. Like, if you ever read that book, I can't think of the name, but it was by L. Patrick Moynihan. I read that when I was a little girl, about how he was talking to Nixon and the rest of the nation about how the New Deal subsequently will destroy the black family, black faith. But that was by design, systemic racism.
Yes.
That was by design.
Agreed.
It was social engineering. So when you say reward, she's not rewarded because she will never reach the potential that she could. Because we want to keep you on government assistance.
Yes.
So it's not a reward.
Well, LBJ, I mean, that guy was more racist than...
Super
I mean,
racist.
he was one of the most racist people we've ever had in the White House.
Super racist.
And the whole reason he signed the Civil Rights Act in the law was because he believed it would keep the black community down. And,
also Martin Luther King and Malcolm X threatened to go to the UN.
Yeah, well, there you go. Yeah,
that'll stop you.
Right.
But that's the thing. It was designed to keep them as second-class citizens. Slavery yet again.
Yeah, sure.
Because if you're dependent upon me, I can take it away any.
We'll make you a slave one way or another.
Which is a big reason why I learned I couldn't be a Democrat, because that was some of the things that they were championing. Now, I know some amazing Democrats, and I do believe we need social programs, but to say that we stay on those until you die is slavery again.
Amen.
And so me being a CEO to empower other people, that's why I help women and minorities and veterans get contracts with the government and corporations, because there's no reason why you shouldn't be successful. But that doesn't mean the obstacles that I have that are uniquely mine don't happen. But they can be overcome, but they're there. And that's what I want sometimes people to acknowledge. They are there, but it's not that they can't be overcome.
Yeah.
But they're different, and some of that is from social engineering. Some of that's from people's choices. You know, so you there's a lot that went into where Black people are and where they're changing. Like Black wealth is growing exponentially.
Yeah, great.
Because now they're starting to be like, this didn't work for me. It worked when there was a bunch of factories. And you needed a lot of the like the UAW and all those.
Unions.
Yeah, that worked when Uncle Jared worked at Navistar, and bought a Cadillac. You know what I mean? That doesn't work in the global economy where we're dealing with technology. That doesn't work. So now Black wealth is growing, and now because wealth is growing, they're like, I got trust fund kids now. That system doesn't apply to me. And so now because they're gaining wealth, they're starting to say, what do I want to happen legislatively? What do I want to happen in the world? And it's changing. And what I want my Republican brothers and sisters, quite transparently, my white brothers and sisters in the Republican Party, is to start addressing that population, because I think when they think sometimes of the minority population, everybody thinks of the welfare queen or everybody thinks of the person that's down and out. I didn't grow up in poverty. So talk to me about EBT stuff. Now, I do know people that are on EBT, and I do think there needs to be a pathway to success. But again, have we totally addressed the social engineering? No. Now you're like, get off of it. But government, you pushed it for this to be a generational thing, and now you just want to cut it off. That's a problem for me. So no, I mean, you can change your world in this country. Nobody white has ever stopped me from getting anything. That doesn't mean the obstacles that are sometimes built in for people that look like me don't exist. Some of them are self-imposed. Some of them are structural. And so we have to overcome it. Yeah. You're quiet.
Well, this is good stuff. I'm listening.
Oh, my God.
I'm listening.
I got an agreement. My day is full.
Listen, and we can end right there, right?
Yeah.
No. What we should do now is transition to. You and I don't see eye to eye on DEI, necessarily.
Right.
Like, I think we're in the same ballpark.
I
but
think
we're probably
moderately.
Yes. So I believe in diversity. Diversity is a powerful thing, and it's a good thing, right? Heaven's diverse. Heaven will be diverse. Heaven, that's great. I believe in equality.
We talked about this with equity.
Equity, right? Like, and I get it.
Black folks got sweat equity in America.
Okay. But where I really have the issue is inclusion. Okay. Because what gets to be included? Who gets to be the arbiter?
I have an answer.
Okay, please give me the answer. Because I had this conversation with Senator Greg Taylor.
And he messed it all the way up.
Greg, if you're listening, I'm sorry.
He knows.
Yeah, no, but and it's like, okay, who gets to decide? Because we don't include everything in our culture. We shouldn't include everything in our culture. There are things that we have to say, this is evil. Yeah. We don't want it, right? And so who gets to decide what is included?
It's easy answer.
Okay.
We start with the people that have been excluded.
Isn't that dangerous though? Because who are we excluding right now?
Well, I mean, if we want to start from the top groups.
Well, no, I'm saying like there are bad people in the world. We'll take MAPS. You know what MAPS are? The group MAPS, minor attracted persons.
Oh,
so it's the pedophilia groups, right? We exclude them for good reason because it's evil. They should not be included. But they will say, and I've heard them say it, we feel excluded. So if you say the groups that have been excluded, well, they're going to raise their hand and be like, hey, we're the MAPS over here, like, so you need to bring us back to the table.
You know what I tell them?
What would you
tell them?
Take a
number.
But that's not very inclusive.
I didn't say no, but there's some folks that fought harder and need to be included.
Wait.
First.
No. Okay, but see, that's concerning to me. You didn't say no.
I said take a number.
No, but why don't you just say no? You're not welcome here.
I think I would rather focus, because that's a subgroup of a subsystem of because some legislative places have said that's okay. That they need to work on that stuff kind of legislatively. Yeah. That's why we have sex offender lists. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But can we start with the folks that were excluded quite a different?
And I get where you're coming from. Yeah. I'm just saying you've got to recognize we can't open that gate too far because or not have standards. I'm not saying, hey, the black community, yes, you were oppressed for years in our system, right? There was systemic racism. I think we've moved past much of that. However, like that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying when you start saying inclusion, you start opening up the door to really evil things being included in your culture. That's how we got drag shows in downtown Fishers with guys waving their junk in the faces of children.
Well, as a black woman, I just feel like everybody starts taking off stuff. We start off, come on, black people. And here comes somebody that loves squirrels. And you know what I mean? So it's like we always start a movement, and here comes, it's just like the Israelites.
I get it.
When they left, it said it was a mixed group. Them folks, we don't even know who those folks were. And that's what irritates me. We start a movement, and we're like,
riding your coattails.
Always.
It's like,
and then the conversation goes away from us.
That is no different than a hip hop star. You got one hip hop star, but he's got 18 guys who ride his coattails. You have no idea who they are.
No, now he's taking care of a dude in Calabasas.
He rolls up
get
with a posse. You're like, who are these guys? Are they talented? We have no idea. They're just with him. So
that's the thing, is like we get off into these other things. Inclusion wouldn't be needed if exclusion hadn't have happened. And I think that's when
so let me jump back to your prophetic, godly woman, persona, because that's what you are.
Yes, sir.
Is God inclusive?
I think you're so good. I think God has covenantal rules that you must abide by. I think sometimes that's where people get messed up. I think, God's not discriminatory.
I think he's very discriminatory.
I think the difference. Thank you, Holy Spirit. I got you. I think the difference is because
don't let her do it, Holy Spirit. Don't let her do it.
You're gonna rebuke me.
So I'm praying against you now.
You can't rebuke me. I think we sometimes take, because we live in a democracy, and apply it to kingdomness. And heaven is a monarchy.
Okay.
It is not a democracy. Whatever the king says goes, it is law. And you do have to follow his law, or you don't get the benefits of the kingdom.
But we aren't a democracy. We are a constitutional republic.
That's true.
So we are technically under the law, right? That's what a republic is. It's the rule of law, right?
We are under the law, but I think the difference where we get caught up, especially Western Christians, we want to say in everything God does like we do here in the State House. We don't get a vote.
That's right.
For what God says. If he said it, that is what it is.
So then how do you reconcile when Jesus says, on earth as it is in heaven, if we are followers of Jesus, I'm not calling for America to be a theocracy. I don't think that's what God wants, is America to be a theocracy.
Well, let's just be honest. All human government is the rejection of God.
I disagree with that, because God's the one who ordained government to begin with.
He said government is on his shoulders.
Yes, but he's also, there was government even before creation.
Yes, his government.
His government, correct.
But then with Samuel, they said, give us a king like everybody else. That's when we went awry.
Okay, but push back on you. Was there not government before King Saul?
There was kingdom government because we went to the prophet, and the priest went to God.
But I wouldn't even say kingdom. I would just say government in general. Forget about kingdom. So Samuel was a governor, essentially, is what he was, right? So there was government. So I don't think government's a rejection of God. I think government can reject God. I think that's what the people did with Samuel. They said, hey, we reject what God has given us. And he said, hey, I've given you a good government.
Absolutely.
Right?
I think we're in agreement. And I think that's the separation. Ever since we went that way, if we want a king like everybody else, you bring wickedness into the governance of what's happening. And that is where we are. The things that are happening in America and the world is because we have morally gone away from what should happen.
I agree with that.
And so some of this is consequence. I feel like God is judge. I feel like Donald Trump is the judgment to America.
I see. I don't know. I think God is. I would maybe say I half agree. I think.
Are you kind of pregnant?
Yeah, I kind of pregnant. Hey, Mom, Dad, I'm kind of pregnant.
Kind of pregnant.
No. I could it be both? Could Donald Trump be the hand of judgment and also the banner of mercy that God is pouring out on America?
I don't feel mercy.
You don't?
As a black person in this country right now, no, I don't. I have never been more naturally, godly, spiritually, I'm solid. because God got me. I'm in Goshen. But naturally, there's days I can be terrified.
Of what?
Of the blanketed, the illegal DEI. First of all, DEI is not illegal. You haven't arrested anybody.
No.
It's not illegal. So the movement of...
Did they make it illegal? I don't think anything got made illegal.
No,
I think it was more just like, hey, get it out of, agencies.
Yeah, but Donald Trump keeps saying it's illegal DEI. I think that's, when you're calling something a criminal act when it's not, that's a problem. And so when you start to do that, you see in the blanketness of get anything that references DEI out of there. That's why, Harriet Tubman was taken off and put back on. When you're that vague and you don't have cultural advisement, when you're not looking at certain things of what this is. Now, I'm just giving my statement. I know that DEI benefited more white women and Asian people than it did me.
I would agree with that.
I think DEI went a little extra. But now I feel like people, white males, are throwing tantrums. And that we had this discussion. I do feel like during the last 2 or 3 years, there has been an anti-white thing and an anti-white male. There has been discrimination. But the rest of us that have been dealing with discrimination are like, welcome to the club.
See, but that's a terrible attitude to have, don't you think?
It's the truth.
No,
y'all been oppressed for 3 years. Okay, give it 400.
Oh my gosh.
I would think that it would bring you together to be like, now we understand what other people have been going through.
Right.
But that's not what's happening. This should never happen to me, so let's get rid of it right now.
Or how about we say this should have never happened, period, so let's get rid of it.
We're saying, but then what we're also saying is exclusion never happened.
No, that's not what we're saying. We're saying exclusion, and this again, I don't agree with the statement, but I think some people should consider saying exclusion should never happen. Now, I think God is exclusive. I think there are things in culture you should exclude. The Bible says to love what is good and hate what is evil, right? So exclude evil from the culture. So I think, again, when we use blanket terminology like exclusion or inclusion, we're going to exclude, we don't exclude anything and we include everything. So,
and to that point, I think what happened with George Floyd it's almost like what happened with Emmett Till. It made the country say, we don't like what we look like, and we got to do something. In true American fashion, we do tomahawks, we just go big.
Yeah.
And what we needed to do is section down some things. Hey, this doesn't go. I don't believe because you are white, you're automatically racist. I don't believe that. That's ridiculous. I do believe in white privilege, in that, I saw your eye twitch. In that, it's back to cultural things. I think most white people, when they hear privilege, start to think of material achievements and accomplishments.
Yeah.
My people, when they hear it, it is the treatment. It has nothing to do with So I do believe that sometimes when I'm looked at, it's guilty until proven innocent, where you're innocent until proven guilty.
When it comes to white privilege, I wouldn't say white privilege. I think privilege is a thing, right? I think
I think there's a benefit of the doubt more so than we get.
And biblically speaking, I'm going to maybe back you up here a little bit. The Bible says, "To whom much is given, much is required." So you were privileged to be given something, right? So if you've been given much, you have a duty and probably more of a requirement to do something with that thing you've been given.
Tell the white people.
Right? Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. That's
the thing, because that's right. And I feel like that's what DEI was trying to do in its infancy.
Maybe in its infancy, but I think it got way out of line.
Absolutely. But do you think you're going to repair 400 or 300 or 20 years of, you're not going to repair it?
Were you alive 400 years ago? No. You're like 25 years old. Okay,
no.
But here's, and I want to read something. This is Joshua 1:9. See what I did there? I kind of said, I'm gonna poke the bear a little bit, and then soften it up with the honey right there. Be like, So it's an art form, Terry.
You got it down. I got you.
Okay, Joshua 1:9 says this: "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Now, this is Joshua speaking to the Israelites. Now, what had they come through? They had come through wandering in the wilderness, and before that, 400 years of slavery in Egypt, right? And Joshua and Caleb were the two spies that said, hey, we can take the land.
Yep.
And there were 10 spies that said, no, we can't. Why? Why did they say, no, we can't? Because they were living in their victimhood of 400 years of slavery. They didn't know the God of victory because they felt like they've been living not in victory. They've been living in defeat for years,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
And so Joshua in this statement is saying, have I not commanded you? It's like he's saying, guys, stop going back. Stop putting yourself in the 400 years. And so even when you as a sister in Christ, when I hear you say, we had 400 years, I'm going to say the same thing Joshua said. Don't do that. I'm not going to say, have I not commanded you?
But
Because then you'll be like,
that's white privilege.
Don't you command me? That's white privilege.
Right. It's white privilege for you to tell me don't do it.
I didn't command you. I just said,
Well,
I
you
think
can't
it would be a very helpful thing. So,
But the adage word there, he said, your God.
yes.
And so I absolutely agree. I think the black family was strongest when it was a family unit and when it was full of faith.
Yeah, I agree.
We have moved away from that faith. So that's the huge work we have to do.
So we got to get faith back into everything.
Absolutely.
We got to get God back into the center of everything. Boom, full circle. we started there and we're ending there. Right?
We did it. All right.
No, I think this is great. I love this discussion. I think, and I hope what people take away from it is that ultimately we need the Lord in our culture, right?
Yeah.
We need him in our government. We need him in our families. We need him in every aspect in our businesses.
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
I went through a professional development to heal some personal things.
Okay.
And for the first time, I laid down my blackness. And I know people are going to be, what? Because that had become my whole identity.
Yeah.
And I love being a black woman.
Yeah.
We're awesome. I love being a black.
You
but
are.
thank you.
Yeah.
I got to lay it down and deal with the spirit that came here. The spirit that came here has a assignment to take care of. And once I got that, I learned that my identity rests in Christ,
Amen.
not in my exterior.
Amen.
But it took an existential situation for me to separate the two because that was built into me. So that is a journey that I think a lot of black people are on. I'm not just a black person. I love being black.
Yeah, right.
But I have a whole lot to offer, and now it's a possibility. And that's what I want sometimes white people to understand, too. That's new for us, too. Like, I've never been at a job where they were like, hey, Terry, here Juneteenth's coming up. How you feeling about it? What? Is this a setup?
That look, man, you could kill somebody with that look. I'm telling you.
Because we are, like I said earlier, when I got in the State House, God had to guide me because of culture shock. I think we don't talk enough about it. Was a culture shock for all of us. Yeah. I don't know how to deal with your asking me what my hair products are. You know what I mean? Because as a black person, I've always had to learn about Americana for my survival. You know what I mean? You didn't have to learn how to use oil sheen for your survival.
I had to learn how to use some weird stuff, though. I'm going to tell you right now. Listen, this hair doesn't just do itself.
Some shea butter.
Yeah.
Yeah. but now we are letting go of that I am an American and I can make my own path and I don't have to be beholden to necessarily assimilating to Americana. That's a new place for us. Because we've always had to be, I know what happened on Seinfeld. I don't care about Seinfeld. But I had to know about a water cooler.
Say that again, just like you just did. Your voice just went up 4 octaves, I think. The pitch just went.
That was my code switch voice.
That was the Seinfeld voice.
But we're getting to a place where I don't need the acceptance of white people because they are Americans just like I am. I don't need your acceptance. Here I am. And that is a place we are learning to navigate. You know what I mean? So I think both of us culturally with DEI were like, this is new. Like I've had white brothers be like, I don't want to learn all this. I just want to help you be successful so you can change your community. And I felt that was very honest. And we got to be okay with that. You all, I think, now some black folk might be mad at me. I don't care. Black Indie Live, y'all be okay. Y'all don't come for me.
I got your back if they do.
Thank you. That's right. That's right.
And they like me, so I'm good.
I think also we didn't discuss our expectations to white people to know everybody's culture. We expected y'all to know Black, Caribbean, Haitian, Asian, Filipino. We expected you to know all of that in its complexities in 3 years. And when you didn't say the right thing, or if you didn't know the right stuff, then now it's a whole blow up, and here comes cancel culture. I feel like the liberals lean too hard on it. And then you got this whole movement. I'm not gonna be their teacher. Well, how they gonna learn? You know, so like everybody went extreme. And that's what I think. We needed balance in DEI. I think if we would have gotten balance and not been on the extremities of each side, because we were all learning how to be Americans. We've always been a Cobb salad. You got eggs here, you got bacon here. Yeah. We've said we were a melting pot, but we weren't. We were siloed. And George Floyd unified us, and they were like, okay, we're a melting pot. But we really know how to do this.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So that's what I feel. Like
that's good. I think it's powerful. You will get pushback though when I've said this publicly, and I'll still say it. I don't like the idea of multiculturalism.
Okay, here we go.
No, and here's don't do that yet. Let me finish. Let me finish. Can I finish? Can I finish? Can I finish?
Okay,
Can I finish? Can I finish?
Yes,
George
sir.
Bush.
I got you. You have a right. I'm listening.
No. Okay, so and that's what happens. People are like, how dare you? No. I didn't say multi-ethnicity. I want that, right? Multi-ethnicity. But in America, we assimilate under one shared culture. That doesn't mean you can't bring aspects of who you are and your cultures. Like the Italians bring great pasta. The Mexicans bring great, salsa and chips.
Good job. I thought you were gonna say something else. Good job.
No, I'm just thinking about food right now, right? Because I'm hungry. But what I'm saying is, who are we as America? What happens with multiculturalism is what you get in Gaza and Israel right now. You have two diametrically opposed cultures living in the same place, and it literally rips a people apart. It rips a nation apart. And so, but for some reason we say, oh no, like everyone's culture. You live over there. We've created tribalism because we say, well, your culture is totally you, and we're not going to ever tell you to come on. Like we don't even ask people to learn English, right? Why? Because that would be giving up their culture. No, learn English so we can all be successful together, because I can't help you if I can't understand you, and you can't help yourself if you can't communicate to 99% of the people in this. But we're afraid to say that, and that's why I think we've got to get back to this place of saying, hey, we are a melting pot. And I think melting pot is awesome, but if we really want to address the Cobb salad, we've got to be willing to say, okay, well, there's certain aspects of the American culture that we lay down our pride on what we think is, like me personally, and we accept who we are as Americans under one banner, one culture, and that builds a successful, powerful, united nation and community of brothers and sisters.
I love the thought of that.
And we'll end right there. We're so glad you guys joined us.
Oh my gosh. I think because the assumption is multiculturalism is already here. And so let me say this about Black people. This is why we have so much issue, because a lot of people look at it like we're a race. I feel like our race is human. The human race is
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
However,
Paul says there is no slave, nor free, nor Greek, nor Jew, but we are all one in Christ.
And Black is a culture. Like Africans aren't Black, they're African. Black is a culture. I know some Black people that don't ascribe to Black culture. We know some.
It's funny.
So Black is a culture, just like, because our African culture was stripped. So we have hodgepodge this culture out of all of that. And so Black is a culture, just like Italian, just like Irish, just like German. But then I feel like people, when they hear Black, just go instantly to race in their understanding. And like, oh my God, here they go again. But that is my culture. Black is my culture. It's not my race. It's not my ethnicity. My nationality is American. So I think, and my culture is different than yours. And I'm a Black American. So yes, there are things that we all have in common. Like we understand, the government kind of.
No, listen,
but I mean,
that's a stretch. Yeah.
I mean, I do think that what I was saying earlier, we have always assimilated because we had to. But now it's like, don't talk about your Blackness because here we go with more Black stuff. But that's my culture. That is hip hop and getting my hair braided and, soul food. That is my culture. And it is within, that culture lives nowhere else outside of America.
Sure.
So to be like, don't do your culture.
No, and that's not what I'm saying is don't do your culture. Recognize there is a shared culture in a community, right? So you bringing your culture into the assimilation, into the melting pot is awesome. Mm-hmm. But then that means I get to take part in your culture too, right?
Yep.
Because we're going to melt together. And so you'll bring a flavor that I won't be able to bring, right? Mm-hmm. But then once it melts, then it blends together. And then my flavor is melted into your flavor, right? And but we've got to have that. We've got to have that assimilation. If we don't, we will be a Gaza and Israel situation.
Well, I mean, when you bring Gaza and Israel, their culture is a lot based on religious choice than ethnicity.
And I think it's the same thing here.
It's not.
You don't think so?
No.
You don't think this is a spiritual battle?
Oh, I think all this is a spiritual battle, but it's not. We're not fighting because of religious choice. We're fighting because of lack of cultural understanding.
I think it all goes back to spiritual, though. if you want to say, okay, we got cultures, I would say the African-American culture or the Black culture has embraced things like abortion more.
Why do I always got to start out negative?
I'm just saying, it's just
what if we embrace mental health?
Okay, well, that's
mental
fine.
health therapy.
Okay, well.
Why is it always got to start? They've embraced violence. Come on.
Well, mental health therapy is a good thing. I'm trying to point out the bad things here, okay?
I see. That's what I'm saying.
No, but I'm saying but wouldn't that be a spiritual battle, right? I think it's a spiritual battle more than it's a cultural battle.
Absolutely, but when you're dealing with a people whose identity is gray, we have a gray identity. We are just now loving us fully without anybody's acceptance. That is a new place. We have always assimilated, always. And now we're not. We are American and we love being American. I had a friend of mine who was in South, because when Trump first got in, I was like, I'm moving to South Africa. And one of my
You said that?
Yeah.
My goodness, we're going to have to you've got a little bit of TDS that we're going to have to work on here because that's...
I was like, I got to get out of here. But he did help my taxes first as a senior.
And you know what? We just passed a big, beautiful bill just not too long ago. So you got more tax breaks coming. You're welcome. On behalf of President Trump, Terry, you are welcome.
The white privilege again. What was I talking about? I got ADHD. Oh my gosh. Oh my God, it was good.
Oh man, this has been good. We have solved the world's problems.
We have
in under 30 minutes.
This is what I love about us, though, and I wish we could have more of these discussions because our perspectives are different.
Sure.
And what at the end of the day, I don't agree with everything you said. You don't agree with everything I said, but we still respect each other as brothers and sisters in Christ, and we're still marching towards how we work this out. And so I think this should happen more often around our state because nobody talks to anybody anymore. They scream.
Yeah. Last night in my Delaware County Lincoln Day, I guess with this airs, this will be a couple weeks maybe. But so a few weeks ago, we were in Delaware County, and we had a 2-hour town hall. And so people were coming both sides of the aisle, far right, far left, and a couple people far left got up at the end, and they were one guy specifically was saying, how do we unify more? I said, well, I think it starts with this, right? And I made the point, you kind of said it earlier, like the Lord really worked on you to remove the blackness as your identity, because that's not your identity. That's part of who you are, maybe as a created being, but your identity is really Christ, right?
I'm a child of
exactly,
God.
you're a child of God. And I said that to this guy last night, or a couple of weeks ago. I said, hey man, like, I think the reason I can do this, and people can scream at me, and they can yell at me, and they can. I mean, when we were in Bloomington for our town hall, I mean, I was like, it was like.
I just never thought Ellettsville would be proud to the people.
Well, it was Bloomington coming over to Ellettsville. I think the Ellettsville people were like, oh my gosh, what is happening right now?
We're going to have a barbecue restaurant in here. So.
But I can walk away from those town halls and be totally fine, because my politics are not my identity, right?
That's good.
My identity is who God says I am. And so when you disagree with my politics, or even, not that you would do this, but like if someone were to attack my politics, I never see it as a personal attack, because my politics are not my identity.
That's true. But I wish more people saw this dude, my homie. I think sometimes the loudness and the screaming overshadows your amazingness. And I'm going to keep it 1,000.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
You're welcome. I think sometimes the kind of Christian nationalist thing, I think that's what people have labeled you as.
Yeah.
But I think it overshadows your greatness. I think if people just could see you as a dude, because sometimes that seems like you're not reasonable.
Yeah.
I think if people saw this dude, that they could be like, okay, I may not get all of it, but he really cares. And I think you have a huge opportunity. I'm not going to say all that I want to say, because you have to submit to authority. But I think people like you a lot, some than other people that are in the State House. And I think you have a great opportunity to make sure all Hoosiers know that you care. Yeah. And I think sometimes that nationalism language seems harsh and separating. So I think you have a huge opportunity that easily you could be governor of the whole state, and people can feel like that. Back to what I said about Bill Hudnut. I think you have that opportunity, and sometimes that takes not talking so much.
This is the second time you've said
is that. What I said?
Yeah.
Did I say that? Okay.
Yeah, no, but no, and I really appreciate it. It's very humbling, and I think as we do stuff like this, as I use this play, I have. This is not something that I ever really wanted to do. Right?
Really?
No. So like,
I think this is great.
Well, listen, no. I'm saying like the politics, right? Politics. So like I love being a pastor. If I could just be this private citizen, nobody knew, and I could just love on people as a pastor and just kumbaya and rainbows all the time. Like that'd be awesome. But God has a different plan sometimes than you, and I think He's wired me for it. But I think one of the things that people are starting to see when we do these town halls is they're saying, "Man, he knows what he knows."
And you show up.
But that's what they say. They say, "But you came." And even when I was in Ellettsville, Bloomington, there were some people that came up to me that were really not very kind during the whole thing. And they came up to me at the end and they said, "Hey, we were glad that you were here. Like that shows a lot." And I said, "Hey, listen, I tell people this. I said, I love you. I'm not just telling you that. I do love you.
Yeah.
Now, I love you enough to tell you what I believe is true, and maybe you don't like that.
Sometimes, maybe not say." But that's what I know. The pastor's heart in you wants truth to go forward at a level of veritas level. You want it to go full truth. Yeah. But as your senior in politics,
you're 25. What
the
heck?
You can soften the blow. You can, because people are still learning who you are, and media, especially liberal media, has pegged you as a racist, homophobic monster. but this is back to what we talked about earlier. Republicans, we have to learn how to write the narrative. Yeah. And I think you have an awesome opportunity to write a narrative that says, I want truth to happen, but I want all people to feel like I serve them.
Yeah, well, and that is my heart. Is I will give you the shirt off my back. I don't care what race, ideology, creed, faith you are. It's if you need help, like I want to help you. And that's the and I want to see you become. I want to see you become all that you can be. Now, I believe that God has something great for everybody, right? And so I believe they can't become all they can be.
Deuteronomy 8:18.
Right, yes, that's right. And so So I want to connect them to their creator because I know that's when they're really it's going to be adding rocket fuel to the ship, right? They're going to take off and it's going to be awesome. But and some people don't get that and they don't want it right away. But you always hope, okay, you planted a seed, right?
Yep.
Even at these town halls, hey, I hope we planted a seed in somebody's heart, right?
Yep.
And let the Lord grow it. And it's not my job to grow it. It's just my job to go and speak the truth and do it in love, right? And,
do it in love.
Now, here's the deal, Terry. Listen, I know we got to wrap this up because it's been 30 minutes turned into 35 minutes, but the good shepherd knows how to deal with a wolf.
Absolutely.
Right. And so,
because I'm a prayer warrior, I don't play with demons.
That's right.
And I don't play with the demonic. And I the thing that I'm fighting and wanting to fight is poverty in my community, the poverty mindset. Because you can have a lot of money and have a poverty mindset because you don't believe this will stay. So you make not great decisions. And so this thing I had to learn. Because I didn't know the difference between making income and understanding finance because I wasn't taught. So, but that poverty mindset is an evil thing.
It is, yeah.
Poverty produces hopelessness and violence, and it produces a lot of different things. That's why I was talking about the engineering of breaking up families and poverty. That's where drug use comes in and joblessness. Like, it's evil, and I want to cut the head off that demon and show people you can be successful, and God wants you to be successful. But that does take work because sometimes those demonic things have been with people so long. They've been there. Sometimes depression has been their friend.
Yeah.
So when you're like, you can be anxiety free. They're like,
it's called Stockholm syndrome.
Yes. Yeah. And so that takes work. It takes spiritual guidance to do that. And I am glad that you are. I'm glad you have the Holy Spirit and He can pull you back.
Yes.
But I'm also glad He guides you. And that's the thing that's my hope. I want people to see the whole of you and not snippets of you. You know what I mean?
That. Well, I really, really love you. And
I love you
appreciate you, and you're an awesome blessing to me and to our state.
I am.
And yes, you are, and you know it.
Thank you. I honor you so much, and ever since we read Brewburger fighting, that poor
funny.
lady.
Yeah,
she's
still Marie Morgan. Oh, no, she's still around. Like, yeah, well, we got into it. It was
he was like,
DEI. You're a Republican,
buy my hamburger. She was over there like, oh my God.
Marie's awesome. She was actually they come to her and a bunch of other prayer warriors from the community. They'll come down to the State House. They'll pray over our office, walk the State House.
She's faithful. You got to
awesome.
have those on your team. But it's going to be well, and I'm here to.
Yeah. Well, listen, you're doing a lot for so many people. You're doing a lot for the Republican Party too, and I think the Republican Party has gotten a little complacent, maybe a lot complacent in a lot of ways. And so I like that you're doing what you're doing to help see maybe a holistic perspective, and that's good. Hey, if people want to reach out to you, get a hold of you, hire you for, consulting,
I'm not as socially savvy as you, Micah. You can find me on Facebook at Terry Dove-Pittman and our website, the Gideon Group, LLC. And we'll do what we can.
I love that name, the Gideon Group. Yeah.
God gave that to me.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's bringing people out of hiding.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
The angel of the Lord showed up to Gideon and said, "Arise, mighty warrior," when he was hiding.
So check this out. Here we go. Okay.
You
can never stop a pastor.
My staff is like wrapping up. Oh my gosh.
Here's the thing about Gideon.
Jim's I'm not making eye contact with Jim right now. So
he was the least of the least tribe.
Yes.
And he was saving things. So check this. He already knew how to save stuff, but it was on such a small level.
Yeah.
So that's why God was like, you're going to save a nation because you already know how to do it. Yeah. And that's what happens to people. They think, oh, I just know how to knit.
Yeah.
And that's my gift. But that could turn into, what's the lady with the purses here?
Vera Bradley.
Yeah. That could turn into Vera Bradley.
Yeah.
So that's the thing is Deuteronomy 8:18, he's giving you the ability to gain wealth. That's God's promise.
That's awesome. All right. That was awesome. Thank you so much. Yes.
That was good.
That was so good.